So the Scarlet and Violet era has some really strange market movements happening at the moment. So if you've been keeping up to date with what's happening, there's a lot of cards just climbing really highly in value. And what's really weird about what's happening right now is some of the cards that are climbing so crazily in value were once valued at like $5 or $10. So we're having some really strong market movement at the moment. And I think it's a really interesting time to be within this hobby. I think the hobby is growing at a rate that's kind of unforeseen, right? But there is a lot of topics that I talk about, and one of them that's very important is sentiment. And I spoke about this in a previous video, and a lot of people actually resonated with that video when I spoke about some of the cards that were once seen as these kind of trend-setting cards that everyone wanted, and then once the kind of hype died down, those values couldn't maintain, right? Now, one of the things that we're seeing with these, illustration rares and special illustration rares, one of the unique factors of them is, yes, that the cards are really unique and they get their own artwork that's unique, but don't forget as well, guys, as Pokemon evolves, a lot of us may get desensitized to these new artwork. When base set came out, don't forget the card's design was very simplistic, and that kind of didn't change for a long time. But we can even see now that's kind of came back a little bit with Master Ball Reverse Hollows. A lot of people kind of really like that classic style now, and they're some of the most valuable cards. So times do shift, times do change, and a lot of it has to do with perceived rarity, and there's all these things that make things collectibles, right? I do think it's pretty interesting to see how much some of these cards are growing in value, but at the same time, there is questions that we kind of need answers to, right? One of them, and I think the real one that we're kind of all trying to piece together right now, is this new demand, this many people entering the hobby. Whenever you go to the store, all Pokemon products are sold out, right? It's kind of a shared thing that we've all just accepted lately. But I think one thing right now that I'm thinking of, and someone that's been collecting for a while, is we're in a momentum swing. We're really in a high point, right? What I'm really trying to project for the future is when Pokemon cards aren't really that big trend thing again. It's kind of like when Pokemon Go came out and pretty much, if some parts of the world were completely blockaded because all these people congregated in one spot because of Pokemon Go. I'm getting that kind of same flashback right now with this. Because Pokemon TCG Pocket came out, we've got this huge amount of people who've entered the hobby. All these people want Pokemon cards. They're kind of getting illuminated to the fact that, well, I can open a Pokemon pack and some of the cards that I pull can be worth a crazy amount of money. And there's a lot of people just really looking at Pokemon cards right now with awe, right? Though there will be a time when, these people that are coming in, they're not genuine fans. They're kind of just here for the trend. It's kind of all exciting to them now. Maybe they won't be able to maintain, and maybe this hype and momentum bubble that we're in will slowly trickle down, right? So it is interesting to see some of these card prices, but then again, can they maintain, right? So the first one that I'm on right now is the Mew from Crown Zenith. Now, this is such a gorgeous artwork. I always thought this was a very undervalued card for a long time, and we're actually seeing some incredible growth on this card. Probably some of the more interesting growth I've seen for a card of this value. You can see right around last year, this was selling for around $6 USD, right? And I did make a video, it was around February or March of last year, and I spoke about how this card was incredibly undervalued. The artwork is gorgeous. Mew is such a heavily desired Pokemon for so many fans. People are really drawn into Mew, right? I mean, it has so many connections to Generation 1. When people played the Pokemon games in the 90s, they always knew you could get every single Pokemon, but you couldn't get Mew. So Mew does have that status symbol for fans, right? So the fact that it was so low valued was quite interesting for me. But don't forget, Crown Zenith had really easy pull rates as well. When we keep moving forward, we can see it kind of maintained that price point for such a long time. But you can see what's happened recently, man. Check this out. From 9 USD in December, this is spiked to 22 USD. What an enormous increase from $6, right? You can see $22 for this card. And I have to admit, I've actually pulled 3 of these in one sitting, right? I had a few Crown Zenith products and I was opening them, and I pulled 3 of these cards. And I always liked the card. I remember when I first pulled it, I looked at it and I was like, wow, what a gorgeous artwork. These kind of artworks are what make people become so gravitated to Pokemon collecting. And I have to admit that I do think that 22 USD is a pretty good price point for this card in particular, given the artwork. However, it also does beg the question, what kind of made this go so high in value as well? What kind of happened where sentiment changed? Did the bubble Mew growing so much in value, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But because the bubble Mew exploded in value, did that cause like a bit of a ripple effect on other Mew cards? You know, this kind of happens in this world, and that's what happens. You know, even Mewtwo, I think Mewtwo's right now not looked at the moment. I think if we get a Mewtwo chase card, you're going to see a huge ripple effect on Mewtwo cards because people really like Mewtwo as well, but they kind of need to be sometimes reminded. You know, I actually found something very interesting because during that Pokemon Go hype, Mewtwo was the most searched Pokemon in the world, but then it became Charizard again. And you know, this is what happens. It's like fashion, right, guys? What we're seeing in this Pokemon collecting world, it's no different to fashion and how fashion changes, right? Skinny jeans were once cool. Now if you wear skinny jeans, it's like, oh, what are you doing? And then now baggy jeans in the future, someone's going to say, what are you wearing baggy jeans for? They're so out of fashion. The Pokemon cards are very much like that. Things become in fashion again, things become out of fashion. Everyone wants these modern chase cards, but guess what? That season will change. The seasons always change within this hobby. Moving on to the next one, which is the Mew 151 UPC Promo. Gorgeous looking card. Obviously, the Japanese version is a little bit harder to pull because it is from a booster box. You can't just get it as a guaranteed promo, but the Pokemon 151 UPC is incredibly hard to get. Very expensive product, and of course these promo cards have made the 151 UPC a fantastic product. If you purchased the 151 UPC and you were holding on to that, you've kind of made a really good decision because now the contents inside that box, even if there isn't any chase cards of your 151 packs, the promos alone are selling for incredible amounts. Look at this, man. If we pull this into the year graph, you can see this was a $4 card in February last year. You can even see it was selling for around that $4, $5 range for a consistent period. If we can see, this slowly started climbing when 151 got out of print. You can see in December of last year, it was selling for 15 USD. And right now it's selling for 33 USD. Doubled in price from December, and it's had an enormous price increase since the start of last year. You can see this Mew 151 is in season, right? And I do think it's because the Bubble Mew has had this trickle effect on other Mew cards. It's like, oh, I really want Bubble Mew, but I really can't attain that right now because it's too expensive. So you know what? I'm going to start looking and fishing for my other Mew cards. I want to see what I can get because Mew, I'm kind of a Mew collector at the moment, right? You know, people just get into their heads. They were like, oh, I want Bubble Mew, but I want to now collect every Mew card. I love Mew. And then they go for every single Mew card that they can find. And of course, prices start climbing up. Now I'm on the Bubble Mew, and I've referenced it a lot throughout this video, but this Bubble Mew is one of the anomalies of the Scarlet and Violet era. It was always a loved card, but the price for this has become incredibly expensive. I'm going to pull this into the year graph. You can see just looking at that graph right now, without even looking at the prices, you can see there has been a huge price shift with this card. I'm going to go into last year when Paldean Fates released. This was selling for around $80, you know, sitting around that $75 range, even finding some points at $90 by June last year. When this card started climbing in value, it just became a world phenomenon, right? It became something that everyone wanted. Everyone wanted the Bubble Mew. Paldean Fates was hot out of nowhere too. It was like, oh yeah, Bubble Mew, whatever, it's a cool card. You know, it was just really weird how it happened. Everyone liked Bubble Mew. Everyone thought it was cool. Everyone kind of liked Paldean Fates. And now guess what? Sentiments change because everyone now says Paldean Fates is awesome. But you know why a lot of people are saying that? Because they can't get their hands on Paldean Fates. It's like that with Shrouded Fable right now as well. People can kind of get it, so they're not seeing the value in it. But guess what? When Shrouded Fable's completely sold out, people are going to fall in love with that Pheasantipity illustration rare. People are going to fall in love with the Houndoom illustration rare. Sentiment will change. And that's what's very important when you're investing in collectibles, is to understand how that works, understand the seasons. Look at this right now. You can see this climbed up to $305 by December, and it hasn't slowed down at all because you can see right now it's selling at 409 USD. What an incredibly expensive card, and it is very, very telling of the market right now and what people are looking for. Now, obviously, I just want to say that piecing these videos together and finding these data points does take a lot of time and effort. So if you are enjoying the video, please feel free to like it to help promote the video. And also, if it is your first time here, my name's Phil. I'm a marketing professional who kind of uses my career experience in the world of Pokemon collectibles. Feel free to subscribe to join the channel. Honestly, it's really awesome to see new people on board. Moving on to some other interesting cards. Right now, I'm on the Pikachu of Crown Zenith. Now, the Pikachu on Crown Zenith has had an interesting journey as a card, right? Because when this kind of released, everyone thought this was going to be an incredibly expensive card. And then when people opened Crown Zenith, they saw how easy it is to pull. And then, of course, the prices tanked. But you can see this card has had an interesting journey as well. pulling this into the year graph, you can see this was selling for $6 in February last year, climbed up to $12 and then fell down to $7. And you can see then it kind of found a high of $21 and it kind of dipped down and it's selling now for 16 USD. Still a pretty expensive card, but of course nowhere near the price point that a lot of people thought this would get. But I'm telling you, man, this card also, I still think it's very undervalued because Crown Zenith, once that's out of print, this card is incredibly unique and it is a secret rare. So I do think that this card could potentially see some market movement beyond this. I mean, if that Mew's already at $22, I don't see why this Pikachu can't get there as well. Now, some interesting market movements as well. The Mespirit illustration rare from Surging Sparks. You can see this card was selling for around $6, you know, around that $7 range in December. And you can see this card has climbed to around 17 USD. Pretty good price for this Mespirit illustration rare. I do think it is a really gorgeous artwork. And of course, Surging Sparks is kind of scheduled to get more restocks, more reprints. But then again, you know, it is a telling time to see how the Pokemon market is growing so much in value. I do really wonder when a lot of these people who have entered from Pokemon TCG Pocket, when they're not finding it as interesting, how some of these prices will fare. You know, that does lay on my mind a lot. Moving on to another one, which is now Paradox Rift, the Yveltal illustration rare. Now, this card for me is one of the coolest artworks of the Scarlet and Violet era. I love Yveltal. I think it's a really, really well-designed Pokemon. And I do think it's really weird to see that this Yveltal is at this price point, whereas the Groudon, which is also in Paradox Rift, is on such an insane price point. There is a few reasons for that. One of the big reasons is because Groudon is so established as a Pokemon and, you know, Generation 3. So many people who love Groudon are also older, so they have more like adult money to spend on their card. It is more desired. Yveltal's from Generation 6. It released in 2013. So a lot of those people that kind of made their connections with Yveltal aren't at that age bracket yet where they have that incredible disposable income to spend like the people who grew up with Groudon are. You can see this one was selling for $5 in February of last year, and you can even see it was selling for $6, crazily undervalued, right? Then it kind of found a point in the market of $17, and then it dropped down to 12 USD, and you can see right now selling for 20 USD. I do think that is a pretty good deal for this card at the moment, but you can see the price growth of this card is incredible, right? Really interesting. When we compare that to the Groudon, right? You can see the Groudon from Paradox Rift. If I pull this into the year graph, this was selling last year when Yveltal was selling for $6. This was selling for $25. And you can see right now, look at that market movement, man. Currently selling for $105. Now, don't forget, this is also an illustration rare, right? So it's not even an SIR. So it is incredible to see that an illustration rare is getting this price point. We don't see this that often. And I mean, in saying that, Paradox Rift is getting some cards really performing well, and they've kind of taken a while to get there. You can even see the Garchomp EX SIR, you know, selling for $15 a few months ago, and right now it ballooned all the way up to $47, pretty much a $50 card. Really interesting that this was selling for $15 as a special illustration rare, but I think again, what I talk about, sentiments change. People are kind of now saying, wow, Paradox Rift is pretty cool. I kind of like those fluorescent designs of Paradox Rift. You know what? I want to see what this card's worth. And then when we even look at the Paradox Rift booster boxes, you can see in the last 3 months, look at that, man, selling for $107 in November, and of course right now selling for 152 USD. Not that surprising because everything Pokemon right now is climbing in value. But then again, is Paradox Rift going to get a lot of reprints? Maybe we're going to see what's happening right now with Paradox Rift. Is it a now or never situation? It is crazy to see the price points that this is getting, and of course you can see that price growth right there. If we pull this into the year graph, you could see last year around this time you could get Paradox Rift for $92. You know, pretty decent price increases, right? So another really interesting one to look at is Obsidian Flame singles, particularly the Cleffa illustration rare. You can see in the last 3 months, this was selling for $8. And right now it's climbed all the way to $23. Now, Obsidian Flames is quite hard to get. It's not the easiest Pokemon set to get at the moment. And of course, that's kind of trickled down onto the singles now. And you can see, of course, Cleffa is quite an expensive card. I actually did speak about this card last year, talking about how undervalued it was. It actually made my list in the top 8 cards under $8. And of course, we can see right now it's selling for $23. Pretty big price increase. I think when I made that video, this card was valued at 4 USD. So then again, it has had some huge growth. More ones from Obsidian Flames is the Gloom illustration rare as well. You can see this was selling for around $6 in November, and right now selling for $13, more than doubled in price, right? And I do think as Obsidian Flames gets harder, we may see some of these very unique illustration rares also climb, though time will tell. Now, another one that's rising in value is the Ninetales illustration rare from Obsidian Flames, and I do think this one is actually long overdue. due for how gorgeous the artwork is. But you can see this one was selling for $11 in November, and right now it just climbed all the way up to $26. Pretty good price for this Ninetales. I do think it is a gorgeous artwork. Though, you know, looking at these cards, what's really cool is obviously it's cool to see when they kind of rise in value, but what's also important is picking these cards before they actually climb to these heights. And I do talk about that within this video here. Within this video on screen, I actually look over the 7 Pokemon cards and products that probably are a little bit undervalued at the moment. But then again, none of this is guaranteed, but it is interesting to look over. If you're interested to see that video, click the video that's appearing on screen and I'll see you there.